Hello, and welcome to our special series of Green Elephant interviews during March 2021, supporting the annual B Corps month. B corporations, or B Corps for short, are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. Throughout March, we are chatting with key people in companies which have chosen to certify as B Corps and become a force for good. So today I have been joined by Carolina Miranda from Cultivating Capital. Cultivating Capital are reimagining business for the 21st century. They do this by helping other companies to get certified as B Corps and to maintain and improve their activities so that they can have a positive social and environmental impact in the world. They themselves have been a certified B Corporation for 9 years, this very month of March on the 14th, and have just gone through their third certification process in 2020. Carolina is the founder and CEO, is passionate about business as a force for good, being actively involved in the movement on a B local level and on a national level with, amongst other things, the B Corp Women CEOs, We the Change Collective, as I came to call it. Carolina says her goal is to share what I know, which is lucky because that's why we're here. Welcome to the show, Carolina.
Great. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, a delight. We've already discussed the weather. So seeing you got a bit of drizzle and I'm sitting in drizzle and we're recording this in February, we'll say no more. So you started, according to your site, you started your journey around 10 years ago into going back to school with an MBA in sustainable enterprise. Why did you end up starting your company?
Yeah, that's a good question. So taking a step back, I had never really envisioned myself as an entrepreneur or a business owner, but as I started to look around at, what can I do to try to make a difference in the world, I realized that a couple of things that I was very passionate about, that I felt very strongly about, was addressing issues of social injustice and then also addressing issues of environmental degradation and climate change. And so when I was looking at, what are some possible ways to address this, for me, moving into the private sector was actually a big step. I really believed then, and I believe now, that the private sector does have to step up to play a role in this. And so when I was in graduate school and kind of thinking, well, what am I going to do next? I'm kind of a minimalist at heart. And so I really had no interest in products, in developing a product.
No.
Even though I fully recognize that all of our products need to be redeveloped in more sustainable ways. But so then I was thinking, well, what can I do to help companies along this path? And consulting basically was, consulting was the path forward for me. It was the way that I felt I could make the biggest difference by taking what I knew and helping other companies to implement these practices in their organizations. So that's how Cultivating Capital came about.
Okay. And the name Cultivating Capital, I mean, obviously capital has this very negative capitalism and with there's a lot of pressure to kind of change capitalism for better now. What's the capital aspect to it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because really, when we think about capital, we think just about financial capital. And
Yes.
I get, questions on a regular basis saying, "Hey, we're looking for investors," or "We're looking for this, does your company help with that?" And no, that's not what we do. But the name was chosen very intentionally,
Okay.
because I think that we need to rethink capitalism, and we need to rethink our notion that the only type of capital worth paying attention to is financial capital. So when I started Cultivating Capital in 2010, this was at a time when we were gaining more awareness about the concept of the triple bottom line, which we don't necessarily talk about it too much in those terms anymore, but it definitely underlies a lot of the work that's happening in terms of shifting the way that businesses operate. And so for me, I was thinking, well, as a sustainability consultant, how do I choose a name for my
Mm.
business that is going to reflect growing all of these three types of capital? So paying attention to your natural capital and how you're managing that, paying attention to your social human capital and how you're managing that, and paying attention to your financial capital, because you do need to be profitable. You do need to remain in business. And everything that I do is working with businesses. So I remember somebody telling me, you realize that if you name the company Cultivating Capital, they're going to think that you're a investment firm or something, and you're going to have to be explaining this all the time. And I said, well, that's a conversation that I'm willing to have, because I think that it's going to be part of how we rethink capitalism as a whole.
Uh, and yeah, it's an interesting thought. And what jumped to mind when you said that was that it, I suppose it's a different type of investment. Investing
Yeah.
in sustainability is a different type of investment, is that what we need to do? That's what needs to be done to change capitalism, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say not just sustainability, but also social impact, right? So we need to be looking at, with the natural capital piece, how do we invest in sustainability? How do we run companies that are not leading to environmental degradation and contributing to the climate crisis? But also in terms of social capital, how do we ensure that we're having as positive a social impact as possible, right? With our employees, with our suppliers, with everybody that's being touched by our business. So you're absolutely correct in the sense that you're making different types of investments for different reasons, and those investments are going to yield returns in different ways too. But all of that goes into running a business in a very holistic manner.
Just going back on your previous comment about the triple bottom line.
Mhm.
Um, you said that, and perhaps one, could you explain the triple bottom line, because not everyone here in the UK understands it. But also, you said that it's not talked about much anymore. Is could you just mention a little bit more on that?
Sure. The triple bottom line is basically this concept that companies have traditionally looked at their bottom line, like literally the
Yeah,
bottom line that shows their net
profit and
income.
loss. That's all they care.
Exactly, exactly. And so it was kind of like an idea that came up, I want to say, in like the mid to late 90s, saying, in addition to profit, we also need to look at the people and planet. So the triple bottom line, in short, refers to people, planet, profit. And so it's looking at not just how the company is generating its profits or its overall profitability, but it's looking at how is it affecting people? Like, is it generating those profits in a way that is perhaps exploiting people in its supply chain, or exploiting its own workers because they're not paying living wages and so on. And then certainly the planet piece is looking at what kind of effect is a company having on the planet in terms of its business
Yeah,
operations. So is it dependent upon, releasing toxins, into the environment? Is
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
deforestation, climate change, all of these things? So triple bottom line basically refers to people, planet, profit as a way for a company to think about its operations, in a more holistic, comprehensive way. The reason why I said that people don't always talk about it too much anymore. And this is really more kind of speaking as a sustainability consultant. There's a lot of
Hey,
debate.
that's your job.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There's a lot
go
of
for it.
debate within the field. Like, some people say we shouldn't be talking about sustainability anymore. Like, they're saying sustainability it's too old, it's too limited. We need to be looking at regenerative. And I think it's really indicative of the field kind of progressing and developing, something that you're going to see in any field. That said, I do believe that these concepts are, and I still use them. I still refer to the triple bottom line. I'll still talk about sustainability because I think it's important for us as professionals in the field to not rely too much on our own jargon. It's kind of inevitable sometimes just because you're immersed in it, but I think it's important to make sure that what we're doing is also accessible to people outside of the field.
To be honest, the name of our show in with the green elephant is jargon. Green, and I know you've been involved in some other green activities, and green is fine because people kind of get it.
Yeah.
But I do struggle because you end up with, what do you look at? Oh, sustainability, regeneration, social impact, and all of a sudden your job description is longer than LinkedIn would allow you to enter. And it's a real problem, isn't it? The language, because the press grabs hold of something and then everything's you get greenwashing. You know, they brand something. Oh, here we go, and it's Greengate. You know, if it's some controversy, I don't know how Watergate got turned into everything with it, add a gate on the end, and it became a critical. Anyway, let's not go into
Yeah,
that.
well, it's so scandalous that it
Yeah,
definitely left
just
its mark
gate
on
is
history here in
scandalous.
the US.
But yeah, do you think the language is difficult? Do you find companies struggle with the those that perhaps aren't sustainability at the core, like yours clearly is, and was built on that message, and those companies that are perhaps thinking, I need, I'm a dirty industry, or I haven't got, I don't look after my supply chain, I don't check if I'm using child labor, and they've got a long way to go. Do they find the language difficult? Do they find entering this game hard?
Yeah, I think that the language piece is a challenge because green served a very important purpose at a specific point in time, right? Green really sent a clear message about environmental values at a time when they weren't necessarily perhaps as mainstream as they are now. But
Yeah,
then your point, that led to greenwashing because people were using the language without following it up with the actions, right? And so I think that there are definitely kind of companies at both ends of the spectrum. There are some that will use the language without the actions, and they're not too, I think they're becoming more concerned because of social media, and it's harder for them to kind of hide what they're doing. But
yeah,
then at the other end of the spectrum, there are some companies that actually are doing some good things, but they're almost afraid to talk about it because they're aware of how there's still much more to do. And so they don't want to, kind of be putting themselves out there as a company that has kind of figured it all out when they're aware that they haven't. And so it is kind of a delicate situation for some companies. And I would say, especially the bigger the company, the more that is at stake in terms of reputational risk. And then just, one other thing I'll throw out there, you mentioned greenwashing. What we're seeing now is purpose washing, right? So purpose has become a big buzzword in business. And
yeah.
now there's companies that are purpose washing. They have this grand purpose, but if you really look at what they're doing, they're not necessarily following that. And so they're being, they're facing a backlash too.
You're actually the second person to mention the purpose washing in our interviews, and now I'll have to say that, put you in the right order now, won't I? But yeah, this, and I do feel so. It was a story we focused on a little while ago on the show, and we I think it was Mercedes, if I remember correctly, and it said, the headline we kind of thought was quite good. Then you read the article and you went with the wrong headline. This is a great story, and you kind of dug into it, and it was a great background. And I think you're quite right. There are companies out there doing great things, and they daren't oversell it because they get absolutely hammered. And I always find it sorry for some politicians. A politician goes out, we said, we're going to do this, blah blah blah, and all of the mainstream um, activists come out and go, yeah, it's good, but it's not great. And you kind of go, oh. And the whole public, I mean, I don't know how we get over that. I suppose that's just throwing that commentary out. It's
Yeah.
It's almost an impossible world that we live in business to strike that balance.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the position that I take on that
Yeah.
personally is I don't really see the purpose or the benefit of always criticizing a company, large or small, for what they're doing and not recognizing the positive steps that they're taking, right? I think it's very easy, especially for those of us, that do believe having strong environmental and social justice values, to look at companies and say they're not doing enough, they've got to do more. And I absolutely want to see them do more. Yet I think that we need to be aware of how challenging it is to shift how our capitalist system operates, and even
Oh,
small businesses
grief, yes,
are in that situation, right? Even small businesses have sometimes some very difficult choices to make about how do they actually live out their values while ensuring that they're also maintaining cash flow. So, I mean, just one example of that is small companies that sell on Amazon, right? Like they know that Amazon has, all of these issues related to it. Like here in the US, one issue is just, the Amazon workers are starting to try to unionize, right?
yeah,
And so, they definitely need some better working conditions. And there's a lot of small businesses that would prefer not to have to sell through Amazon because they don't necessarily want to support how they're treating their workers. Yet that is the retail channel that enables them to get their products out. So I just share that as one example to say that whether we're looking at large multinational corporations or whether we're looking at small businesses, there are some very real challenges in terms of how far can a company go to do the things that ultimately we want them to do. And I think that we need to be sensitive to the fact that it is
a
a
journey.
process.
Yeah, yeah. And said it on many occasions before. It's striking that balance, but we need to. We're imperfect in business. You can't run a perfect business. It's not possible. There'd be something that you were doing wrong, and so we just got to strike a balance. And sometimes you get over confident with a bit of buzzword or a bit of language or a bit of greenwashing or purpose washing, whatever it might be, and bang, you're in the you're in the press. It's such a
Yeah,
shame.
no, that's a great point that, businesses can't be perfect, because at the end of the day, businesses are just a reflection of human activity, and humans are
Absolutely.
definitely not perfect, right?
No.
And so I think that we need to be attuned to that and sensitive to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, changing subjects quite dramatically. I mentioned in the intro that you were the founder of the B Corp Women CEOs We the Change initiative or movement or collective. I don't know what it is. Could you
I'm
tell
not
us?
I'm not one of the founders,
Or weren't you?
but I
Sorry, my
definitely
mistake. I'll accept that.
No, it's okay. I'm not one of the founders. The
Okay.
three founders actually are Kim Kupinis from B Lab, Sarah Schley from Seed Systems, a certified B Corp, and Rose Penelope Yee from Green 401k, also a certified B Corp, both here in the US. And so they're the three founders, but I have been very actively engaged in the movement. And in fact, the three founders have stepped down from their founding roles, and three other women have stepped up to the executive committee, and I'm one of those three.
Ah,
So
that's where I got the
I've
wrong
taken
end
the
of the
baton
stick.
from one of the founders.
Okay. I'll accept the correction, but what is it? Why was there a need for such a specific gender specific group?
Yeah, it really came about 3 years ago, because women-run businesses, including B Corps, tend to be smaller than typical businesses. They face different challenges, like they're less likely to be able to raise capital. There's very clear statistics
Really?
here in the U.S.
Yeah.
about women founders being able to raise money versus male founders. And so, and then of course we're facing some different issues as women, in terms of here in the US, we're not paid equally on par, with men. Even though, we're obviously one of the most developed countries in the world, we're still lagging in that sense. In fact, women in the US are in some ways lagging beyond women in other developed countries in terms of leave policies aren't as well developed. Healthcare is not as well developed. So even women in other developed countries have some benefits that women here in the US don't have. So all of these things really taken together, we were looking at, really there was one question: what can we do together that we can't do on our own, and how do we support each other as women business owners? And so that prompted us to start coming together as a group. And we've engaged in a number of different activities. We have come to an agreement in terms of the pledge that we all take, which is towards radical inclusion and a regenerative economy and supporting women's rights. And the way that we've been doing that is in a couple of different ways. One, we have, for example, like monthly webinars to help women grow and develop their own businesses, because many of us come to this out of a passion for what we do, not necessarily, having vast business experience. And so that's one thing that we've been doing. And then, of course, last year, 2020, there was the elections in the US where there was so much at stake. And so we have a political advocacy group. Yeah, I'm putting it, that's like the understatement of the year.
Yeah. I haven't spoken to a B Corp yet that hasn't had an opinion on that. Yeah. That's fine. You carry on.
It's, everybody has an opinion one way or another. It was really something just so incredible to live through. I'd never seen anything through it, like it in my life. But the B Corp Women's political advocacy group basically was really working on getting out the vote. And so we were able to organize to get 18,000 postcards out to encourage people to go out and vote, particularly in swing states here. And then when it turned out that there was going to be a runoff in Georgia, we were able to mobilize and continue the get out the vote efforts there. And the idea was to support candidates that are going to believe in things that we believe in, like climate change is real and we should do something about it. Issues of racial and gender equity should be addressed. They're caused by systemic reasons, and we need to really address those. So that's basically what the Women CEOs group has been about. And of course, we're entering a new stage here, and so we're now that the elections are over, we're starting to kind of shift our focus to look at how we continue to build upon the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that particular very not green elephant in the room, possibly fake blonde. It was a very strange period in your presidential history, and it's very strange to watch it at a distance. Did it feel as strange as it looked? Because you seem to have somebody who was bucking every international trend in sustainability and equality, and seemed to be getting away with it because of some of the support you had in some of the other states.
Yeah, I would say it was probably stranger to live through it than it was to to witness it from the outside. And it's really it's very unsettling. So I love history. And I was actually a history major, English history major in college. I love history. And I remember when I read a biography of George Washington several years ago, one thing really struck me, which I had always kind of taken for granted, that, every 4 years or every 8 years, the president kind of left and the new president came in. And when I was reading this book, it really made clear to me how significant it was for somebody to willingly step down from a position of power. They had actually wanted him to run again, to run for a third term, because there wasn't any law against that. But he willingly stepped down and gave up political power at a time when a different person could have fought to retain that power. And especially at that point in time, when the country was so young, it really could have taken us in a completely different direction
Mm.
if somebody other than George Washington had been president at that time. And then, of course, you have 200 years of, presidents losing elections, conceding, and, enabling that peaceful transition of power. And I think that what we saw in this last election is that can't be taken for granted.
No.
That really can't be taken for granted. And a lot of it comes down to, who is, despite, our systems of checks and balances and the Constitution, it really comes down to the character of the person who is in that office,
Yeah.
being willing to acknowledge that that's the foundation of our democratic system here. And so it was very frightening, but I also think that a lot of people learned that it's something very fragile and something that really needs to be maintained.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the plans that Joe Biden has put, and he seems to be putting his first foot forward as well. Looks very, very positive. I mean, we're a long way to go in all
Oh
these
yeah.
climate change issues, and of course, as we said before. Well, it was a slight diversion off on that, but I think from and everyone in the world has watched it with what how can an election take 4 weeks, or it seemed to take that long, maybe felt longer to you, I expect. But we all wanted Biden in, but not everyone in America did. So it was an interesting thing to watch. Let's get back onto subject. Uh, the, Thinking, let's focus in on the B Corp piece a little bit, because it is the center of why we're here in B Corp month, is helping others to see why the B Corp movement is such a worthwhile movement to get involved with. I'm a new B Corp. We were certified in August. There's a lot of new B Corps floating around. England is and the UK is growing at some speed. What advice would you give to new B Corps? Because obviously you've lived through your own recertifications and probably lived the certifications and recertifications of a number of your customers. What should new B Corps hit the ground and go, right? They're just coming off the high of certifying and all the lovely buzz that goes out of it and joining the hive, and oh, it's all great. What then should they be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what I would encourage them to do is look at B Corp certification as the start of the journey, not the end of the journey. So once you've gotten certified, you have definitely, celebrated because you've done a lot of work in order to get to that point. You now have a very good baseline of where you're at as a company. But then that's also the time to start preparing for your recertification 3 years down the road,
Yeah,
because your certification is only valid for 3 years. And then you need to recertify. You basically need to go through the process again. And what's going to happen in the interim is that B Lab is also going to update the standards, because the standards themselves get updated every 3 years. So what that means is that you are going to see some differences when you go to recertify. And we don't know yet what those changes are going to be, but you can start looking at, okay, what are the things that we currently didn't do on our impact assessment, which
yeah,
is, for your listeners who might not be aware of it, the B Impact Assessment is an online tool that evaluates your company's impacts. And that's where you need to score at least 80 points to go on to
yeah,
have that verified by B Lab and get certified. But right when you complete your certification, you can bring your team together, your B team, everybody who was involved in that process, and say, hey, what are the things that we didn't get a chance to do that
yeah,
we do want to do?
yes,
So one common one, for example, is calculating and offsetting your carbon footprint. A lot
yeah,
of companies don't do that their first time around because maybe they're confused by it. It seems a little overwhelming and too challenging. but it's not as difficult as it sounds. And you can actually do that. And then one, you are taking this positive step in addressing the climate crisis. You're getting a handle on your own emissions and developing a plan to reduce them. But two, you are going to get points on the impact assessment for that. So you can start now looking at how do you improve your impact and your score over time.
Yeah. It's quite interesting what you say, because when you're going through the assessment, you might say, "Do you do?" It asks a question. I'm not trying to word one, but do you do this for your workers? And you say no. If you said yes, or it would explode out another 5, 6 questions and a whole stack more points.
Right.
And so until you actually open up the book, you actually don't know what they're looking to assess, really, and as to how well you've done that particular factor. And so, sometimes it's just worth going to the assessment and saying yes, and seeing what opens up and seeing what questions will arise. I think always worth saying that assessment is free to use, whether
Yes.
you're a B Corp or not.
Yep.
And so, we can encourage any company to go in and try their hand at the assessment and see what you need to
Absolutely.
work on. Your company obviously helps businesses to become B Corps. At the core of that is you being a B Corp consultant. Now, what does that role consist of? Because it's not something we have in the UK, and I'm not sure how it's established elsewhere in other countries. What's a B Labs or B Corps consultant?
Yeah. Well, you can think of a B Corp consultant as you would a consultant in any other field,
Yeah,
management, um, marketing, whatever it is that you're looking at.
yeah,
And, fundamentally, a consultant has expertise in an area that a company is lacking in. And so they don't have that in-house, so they start looking externally. Obviously, you know this, but sometimes people are thinking that it's something vastly different. And I would say fundamentally, it's not. What is very specific is, my area of expertise as a B Corp consultant and that of other B Corp consultants is we know our way around the B impact assessment.
yes,
So the impact assessment can be the words that I hear from clients. It's confusing. It's overwhelming. I don't even understand the questions. Those are just kind of common things that
yeah,
people have. And I get it. It's the same way that I feel when I sit down to look at taxes. And that's why I hire somebody to take care of that for me, right?
yeah, it's
So,
true enough. Yeah,
so yeah, so what we do as consultants is we help a company to understand what the standards are, what the questions are, and then more importantly, we help them and provide the tools and resources to help them implement that practice. So for example, what I was just talking about, calculating a carbon footprint, a company, like we've worked with several clients that they just skip that question on the BIA. They're like, or they hit, no, we're not doing this. And so what we do is we provide them with tools to be able to calculate their carbon footprint so that then they're able to get that baseline, and then they're also able to get credit for that on the impact assessment. And then, we do that. And that might be a little more unique to Cultivating Capital. I don't necessarily know that, all B Corp consultants will do that, but in one way or another,
yeah,
all B Corp consultants should be helping their clients to understand the impact assessment, understand how to fill it out correctly, be prepared with the documentation that is going to be requested during the review process so that they can go on to get certified as B Corps. So that's basically what we do. We're in and out of the assessment for different clients every day, helping them to bring these practices into their companies.
and I think from our perspective, we have in the UK, and it'd be interesting to find out some of in the Australian interviews. But we have B leaders, and those run a similar role, I think, to your own. Again, all of this is kind of America has led the way in this sustainability movement. UK has taken it and had the opportunity to perhaps B Labs UK as we got here have molded it perhaps a little
Mhm.
bit differently. And so it's be interesting how that spans out across the world as we go. 72 countries, I think B Corps are in now. So, well, there are
Yeah.
B Corps in 72 countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll watch that. But um, from our perspective, if you need to if you need some help getting onto this and onto that, if you're in America, then you need to hunt down yourself a B Corp consultant. If you're in the UK and other places, might be B leader.
Mhm.
From just thinking, just quickly, three questions I like to ask everybody. So, why was becoming a B Corp important to you? What made you turn your company, or did you form the company on the back of the fact you were going to become a B Corp?
Yeah, I actually learned about B Corps when I was in graduate school, and I was really just drawn to what B Corps were doing because at that time we were talking about greenwashing earlier. So I was in graduate school 2008, 2009. That's right when like greenwashing was like at its height, it was just rampant. And there was definitely, it was kind of like this Wild West environment where anybody could say anything and all of a sudden they were a green company. And what B Corps did that really caught my attention is they said, let's set some clear standards. Let's say, if you're being a responsible company, if you are um, trying to act in a positive way, here are some very clear practices that you can be doing. So
Yeah,
that was really, I believe, needed then and still needed now. And
yeah,
then the second thing that they did is they established themselves as a third party that could actually vet whether or not a company was actually doing that. So, in an ideal world, companies would only say things that were true, right? In an ideal world. The reality is we know that that's not the case. And so to have this independent third party that could say, hey, we have vetted the practices of this company. We've, reviewed what they say they're doing. We've reviewed the documentation that demonstrates that they're doing what they say they're doing. For me, that combination, those two things were just huge. And I was like, I like these people. I like what they're doing. And I think that this is exactly the type of model that we need to shift how capitalism is operating, right? Going back to what we were talking about
yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
how can private sector step in and do something differently? Well, they can meet independent third-party standards and they can have those things vetted. So, when I finished graduate school and I was starting Cultivating Capital, I knew from the beginning, like there was just never any doubt in my mind that it was going to be a B Corp. So I started the company end of, 2010. And then the way that the certification is set up is it looks at what you've actually done, not what you aspire to do. So what that means for startups and new
You got to do
companies, you
something.
actually have to have a year of operations under your belt. So I had to have a year of
I hadn't thought
operations
of
under
that
my belt.
actually. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's
That's an interesting thought, though. But there's nothing to stop them to put their aspiring score into the model and say, if we achieve this, then we could certificate. So
yeah.
that's interesting. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of that. That you can't just come out of the box and be a B Corp.
Right.
Um,
You can become a pending B Corp. So B Lab
yes.
does have a designation for pending B Corps, and we've started working with more clients to help them basically from the earliest stages. From some of them haven't even set up their legal structure yet,
Oh, okay.
but they're starting to use the B Impact Assessment as a framework for how to grow their business.
And how to form it. I mean, you can form it.
Yeah.
You have to form it on the basis of its articles of association or legal terms, don't you?
Yep.
So you just in 2020 you went through your recertification.
We did.
That must have been a walk in the park. Third time through, certified. That was easy, wasn't
I wouldn't say a walk in the park. I would say it's definitely, the great thing about the B impact assessment is that it always kind of forces you to look, to really take the time to reflect on how your business is operating, whether it's a big business or whether it's a small business. So, I had to do that as well, just like everybody does when they go to certify or recertify. What was probably easier for me is, I know all the questions and I know what
it? Yeah.
needs to be done. So that helped.
then it just comes down to you doing the right thing at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but always, you are always kind of looking at that continuous improvement, right? You're always
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
looking at, okay, and the carbon footprint calculation, that's something I actually didn't do the last time that I certified or recertified, right? So that was a
yeah,
change that even I made internally within my own business to say, yeah, why am I not doing this?
yeah. And I mean, there are some aspects that you can't. It's difficult for a very small business to achieve. Workers when you haven't got many. Um,
That's right.
so, final question before we get on to your action for us. Can you put on a finger on why you and the company and the people in your company value being in the B Corp movement? Why do you value it the most?
What I value the most, while I respect the standards and the certification process, as I was just mentioning, what I value the most is a community. It's really the people. Um, there's a lot going on in the world that you can look at and say, oh my God, this is so negative. This is so overwhelming. What are we going to do about climate change? And what are we going to do
Yeah,
about racial injustice? All of these things. And it's um, it's easy to kind of fall into despair, right? If you just look at the negative.
yeah,
One of the things that inspires me to keep going is that because I am a B Corp consultant, because I work with B Corps and aspiring B Corps, I'm basically surrounded by people who are trying to be the solution to these problems. And that just means that, generally speaking, they're very driven by this sense of doing good in the world, of helping people. They are very, uh, I don't know if I would say free thinkers. I don't know if that's the best way, but they're definitely willing to look beyond what is just available in
and traditional.
mainstream business as
Yeah,
usual. Yeah, they're kind of non-traditional in their
yeah,
thinking. That's a good way of looking at it, because they have to be in order to create these companies that are doing things that are different. And so they just tend to be like just really great people, and like look at this conversation that we're having. You're in the UK, I'm in California.
yeah,
Had it not been for the B Corp community, we may never have connected. And yet, here we are on this
yeah.
drizzly day on opposite
In
sides
both
of the
countries,
world, having this great
what are the
conversation.
chances that I ring California and it's raining?
Yeah. And we need so much more of it. I hope
Yeah,
that we
drizzle's not good enough.
no, it's not.
It's brilliant. So let's move on to a few things that I asked you to do. Have we got an action that our herd of listeners could perhaps have a go at?
Yeah, the one thing I would recommend to everybody is to be very intentional with how you spend your money, because all of us are voting for companies every single day. Every single product that
Oh,
we
gee,
buy
yes.
is basically supporting a company's practices. So, when you're out there buying things, buy from B Corps. I don't know what the availability is in the UK, but like here in the US, you can buy milk, eggs, tea, beer, flour, all from certified B Corps, right? So
Yeah,
even just something as fundamental as just your grocery shopping, you can support companies that are trying to do good in the world. So that's basically the big recommendation I would make.
yeah, that's great. Have you? I don't know if you have Ocado over there. We have a delivery or an online store called Ocado, and they've recently set up a shop front which only sells products from B Corps.
That's
And
awesome.
makes it very easy to buy your groceries and have it delivered to your door.
Mhm.
So yeah, we've been raving about that because that's great, because we have this wash of labeling. Something will say it's biodegradable, and you'll go, what does that mean? It'll rot in 40 years or it'll rot in 15 minutes.
Right.
They say it's come from sustainable sources. Really? Sustainable after it knocked down the mangrove
Yeah.
trees or before? And it's really tricky. And I think B Corps are trying their best to be better and trying their best to do things the right way, and they've been certificated to that end, but they'll always be trying to be better. So yeah, I love that. I really like that as an action. So also ask you for a recommendation of something that people could perhaps look at, watch, read. What have you got there?
I love reading, and one book that I just recently finished that I very much enjoyed is called The Book of Joy, and it's by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and
All
the
right.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And so you basically have basically the Archbishop Desmond Tutu goes to celebrate the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday with him. And they did these series of talks. And so you get these life lessons on happiness and facing challenges in the world and so on from these two great spiritual leaders, while also kind of getting little behind the scenes glimpses into, you know, how they joke around with each other and stuff. It's quite a delightful book.
Yeah, and it's quite fascinating, really, that somebody who isn't in our day-to-day lives, isn't in our head, isn't in this melee of business and earning a living, but he's focused their minds and thoughts on perhaps giving some guidance and thought, which is stepped away from it, is quite an interesting thought that somebody's had that time to think. I think some of the statements from Dalai Lama are so insightful. He's
Right.
do like some of those. Brilliant. I'll have to go pick up the book. We will do links on our show page to your company, obviously, and to that Book of Joy, and I'll bung in the Ocado link as well for those people that can use Ocado to buy from B Corps, because we really like that. So that's brilliant. It only leaves me with fact or fake. Now, this is a challenging one, really, because on many of our other episodes, I've been able to talk to people about things in their industry, and I have been asked some bizarre questions back from them as well. So I've thought we just concentrate on equality a little bit. So I've got some statements. I'm going to ask you whether you think they're a fact or a fake. So women across the world currently bear the majority of childcare. Okay. But when fathers take on at least 55% of the care responsibilities, they themselves are at a lower risk of depression and drug abuse, and their children will average higher test scores.
They themselves being the women.
So that's if the man, when the father takes on at least 50% of the childcare. Did I say 55? 50% of the childcare responsibilities.
That women's rates of depression and
No,
so on.
the men themselves.
Oh, the men themselves. Okay, that's what I want to
have a lower risk of depression and drug abuse.
I would say yes. That's a fact.
Well, it's played a really nasty trick on you, really, because it's actually they need to do at least 40%, not at least 50%. So
okay.
I was hard. I'll give you a half a point because I think it is a bit hard. Yeah, an interesting one though, because it doesn't take much, and the man won't suffer, or the father won't suffer, the partner won't suffer. They might actually benefit from taking a role in childcare. So I like that one.
Cool.
Okay. Great. 87 countries do not have laws in place to ensure equal pay and equal work among men and women.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
87 countries do not have laws to ensure equal pay for equal work among men and women. Is that a fact or a fake? Oh, she's having a good think.
I am.
And you're trying to toss up the number of countries you know that do not have laws.
Yeah, I'm going through a mental list. Give me more time here.
There's only 200 or so to go through. You should be fine.
Yeah. I would say 87 countries do not have laws. I would say that is fake, because I'm guessing it's probably higher.
You are correct. It is a fake. 113 countries, so that's way over half the countries on earth, do not have laws to ensure equal pay. So I don't know if I'm surprised at that, to be honest. It's taken long enough for what you might call developed countries or the more wealthy countries to do it. So, and even they haven't got it right, have they? Let's do the third one then. Last one.
Okay.
In low-income countries, for every 100 boys who continue their education after high school, only 55 girls do the same. Is that a fact or a fake?
I would say that that's fake because I suspect that the number is lower.
That's actually a fact, according to our good friend. I got those from Gender Inequality Statistics on from Pan Macmillan, and I think it's from a book with Melinda Gates. In the moment lift, I think her book. So we as always. So I think I kind of won that one, but they were tough. I'll give you that. They were tough.
Well, I got 1.5 out of 3. So
1.5. We could call it a draw, can we?
We can call it a draw.
Yeah, I'll accept that on this transatlantic link. So with that amazing draw out of 3, it only leaves me to thank you, Carolina, for joining me on the Green Elephant Show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
We really hope that you found this special B Corp Month episode both informative and entertaining. Make sure you don't miss any of the 31 interviews with B corporations who are striving to be a force for good. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing, and don't forget to spread the word with others. If you have any questions about being or becoming a B Corp or any comments and suggestions about the show, please do get in touch. You can email studio@greenelephant.show or visit the website greenelephant.show, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube or Twitter by searching for Green Elipod or the Green Elephant Show. You can also review the show on Google and Apple Podcasts. Join us tomorrow and we hope you have a sustainable day.